Welcome to Big Hearted Indy, the Citizen 7 podcast about genuine friendship, big-hearted service, and forming whole leaders in Indianapolis. Join your hosts Greg Enos, Don Palmer, and Chris Spangle every episode as they sit down with men who are building, mentoring, serving, and leading across our city. If you want deeper friendships, a clearer sense of purpose, and practical examples of leadership shaped by service, you're in the right place. Welcome to this month's episode of Big Hearted Indy. My name is Chris Spangle. Our guests are Joe Loftus and Mayor Greg Ballard, who is running for Secretary of State here in Indiana. This is just fortunate. Thanks for signing up to do that. We didn't know you were going to do that before we booked you, but
that's right. It was before that. Actually.
We'll talk about that later on. Our hosts are Don Palmer and Greg Enos. Don is here in studio. Greg is in, where are you at, Greg? California?
I'm in the beautiful town of Ripon, California.
Okay.
Wish I was home person, but it's beautiful here. And thanks so much for allowing me to come in virtually today.
Did you say Richmond?
Ripon, R-I-P-O-N.
Okay.
It's the best gateway to Yosemite.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
Very nice. And then we have many friends joining us on Zoom, and we'll take your questions if you're watching live, which you can watch live every month on the last Monday at noon. Just sign up for the email newsletter at citizen7indy.com. That's the number 7, citizen7indy.com. You'll get notified about when it is, and then you can leave a comment in the chat. So if you're watching live, leave a comment there, and we'll ask your question. And then you can catch it again later. If you missed it on that moment, you can catch it in a week or two later on YouTube or Spotify or Apple. So, Don, why don't you set up our conversation today? Tell us a little bit about Joe Loftus and Greg Ballard in case people aren't familiar with them.
Well, one of the purposes of our podcast is about flourishing in the city. And these two guys know as much about the inner workings of what's worked, what hasn't. Greg probably had if a political historian would say, one of the greatest upsets of all political races in the state of Indiana when he became mayor and beat Bart Peterson, who was the current mayor. Joe and I have known each other from days when I was on the Private Industry Council and he served under Mayor Goldsmith. And I'm really eager to hear from both of them. I think one of the things that, instead of this strictly being a public policy or all the public things we know, to find out a little about just who these two guys are. You know, where you were born, how did you two meet, and so we're going to be exploring relationships, the importance of building relationships when you don't need them. And a little how the dynamics of your relationship work. So maybe to start off, Greg, would you like to add anything to that?
No, that's beautiful. Thanks so much. You know, Mayor Greg and I had breakfast a while back, and he told me a book was coming out. And when I found out it was his own memoirs, The Last Urban Republican Mayor, I said, I'm all over it. And I read your book, Greg, and it really encouraged me. And I'm hoping that today, with your strong relationship with Joe, that our audience can take away some really wonderful leadership principles that are animated by having two of you versus one of you working in kindred, like-minded spirit together to make some really good things happen. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'd love to start with you, Mayor, with some of your background, and then Joe kick off with some of yours, and then lead off with how you guys came to know one another. And then we'll take it. Don and I will have some other questions once we sort of form that foundation for our audience here. So, Mayor Greg, why don't we start with you?
Sure, happy to. Grew up in Indianapolis. Was born in a house called on Randolph Street. We moved to 3131 Arthington Boulevard soon thereafter, within the year or two. I grew up there at 3131 Arthington. The area code was 46218, and so kind of in the 30th and Emerson area, right there until I was 12. Then we moved out close to Arlington High School on Campbell Avenue, just one block west of Arlington Avenue, really close to Arlington High School. So that's kind of where I grew up. went to Cathedral when it was downtown Indianapolis, kind of designed at that time for poor to middle income Catholic kids. And that's where I went to school, kind of back when in the day you could thumb to school. And I did that quite frequently, thumb to school, thumb back. And so it was good. It was good. I had 3 older brothers, all went to Cathedral downtown. And then I went to IU, spent 6 years and a summer to get my 4-year degree. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't in trouble, none of that. I was just kind of unmotivated and didn't know what I really wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And, life in Bloomington is pretty good. So, so I kind of stayed down there a little bit. But I realized at some point I had to get on with my life. And I, through a really series of really strange events, wound up joining the Marine Corps after that summer.
Right. Fantastic. Joe, how about you?
Well, I'm not a Indiana native, kind of born in Decatur, Illinois, actually, but grew up at the Jersey Shore in New Jersey. My dad was transferred there when I was 6 years old, so I effectively grew up in New Jersey. Undergraduate at the University of Delaware, and then worked for a little bit and then got ready to go to graduate school. And frankly, I came to IU, but IU was not my first, second, or third choice at the time. But
you wanted to go to Purdue, right?
Well, IU made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
There you go.
I mean, basically, long and short of that. And so they waived my tuition. I had a teaching assistantship, and it made it worthwhile. But about the only thing that I knew about IU the year I moved out here was that their basketball team had gone undefeated and won the national championship that year. So it was in 76. So it's been 50 years that I've been here. And then from IU graduate school in public finance, I got a job at the Legislative Services Agency, nonpartisan staff for the General Assembly. Since it was a part-time General Assembly, gave me the flexibility to go to law school at night. I did that, then was recruited to the House Ways and Means Committee by the committee chairman. And during that time, I was fortunate enough that myself and another lawyer colleague friend of mine were asked to write the tax public policy statement for John Mutz and Steve Goldsmith when they ran for governor and lieutenant governor in 1988. And that gave me the opportunity to get to know Steve during the campaign. Afterwards, after they lost that campaign to Evan Bayh, Steve went back to the prosecutor's office, and every 6 or 8 months I'd get a call from Steve, and he'd have some problem at the state level, and I'd go fix it for him. And so when Steve was elected mayor, it literally on New Year's Day got a call from the office, and they wanted me to come work for the city. And frankly, that was out of my comfort level at the time. I knew no one. My entire political career was at the state. But a good friend of mine, former deputy mayor for Bill Hudnut, basically said, "You want to do this because you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that you contributed to the quality of life in Indianapolis." And it was that same argument that I made everyone that I called to convince to come work for Greg later when we get into that conversation. And so I worked for Steve. And then when Steve ran for governor, I couldn't stay as a public employee and work on a political campaign. So that's when I went to Barnes Thornburg and had a great career at Barnes Thornburg in their running the government practice there. And it gave me the opportunity to continue to work in the political space. And that's how I got to know Greg.
Mayor Greg Ballard, right?
Mayor Greg Ballard,
right,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was quite something, because after I got out of the Marine Corps, I came back home to Indianapolis, had a little job here and there, but 6 years later, I'm running for mayor. And in 07, when nobody knew who I was, and I was expected to lose by 30 to 40 points. One of the persons I called up to talk about being the mayor was Joe. He was worked for Goldsmith, and I said, "What's it like being the mayor?" And he was very gracious with his time and told me about it. Told me what it was like being the mayor. And so that was actually a good point for us. I was still supposed to lose by 30 points at that point.
I was producer on a radio show. I think we were the only ones that had you on.
I think you were. Other than later, Garrison had me, but you and Abdul had me on, no question about it, on
Greg,
on WXNT.
It's a monumental story in your book.
It is.
And is that the first time that you two had met, that phone call?
It wasn't a phone call. It was he came over to the county headquarters and sat down in that little office that they gave me there.
Okay.
It started as a phone call. He called me and said that someone had given him my name and would I come and talk to him about running for mayor. And my reaction was that, I had Greg Ballard here pursuing his Don Quixote fantasy that he was going to become the mayor. But I was glad to call him back. I was glad to go meet with him. And fortunately, most of my peers in the government space did not return the telephone call. And so that gave a lot of opportunity for me to spend time with Greg as he was getting this campaign started.
Greg,
did you guys know right off the bat that you would hit it off? Were first impressions pretty solid at the time?
It's hard to get a first impression of Joe. When we had dinner about a year ago with 20 of our closest friends, somebody put out a picture as I recall, 16 pictures of Joe, and all the same picture. And underneath each picture was happy, sad, exhausted, frustrated. And they were all the same picture. They're all the same picture. So it's tough to get a reading on Joe. But what I knew is that he was very gracious with his time, and he gave me a lot of information, and it turned in. I was very open about that. So you read this in the book. 4 days before the election, even though I had no polling data whatsoever, I went up to him and I said, 4 days before the election, you're going to be the first phone call I make, and he was. He was.
And why was that? What did you need out of him? Why was it a good fit?
That he knew a lot about it. And it was, he didn't just know the day to day. He kind of knew the purpose. He knew the wider aspect of it, and of what it meant to be the mayor. And it was to me, it's very funny. I think I captured it really well in the book. At least I think I did. When this is the second day after the election, and we're in that little office in the county headquarters. My campaign manager, John Cochran, and Joe were in two chairs in front of the little desk that I had. And Joe and John's leg, we had just won this election, and we have no idea what to do. And we absolutely know nobody other than Joe and Bob Grant is about it. And John's leg, one of his legs, I can't remember which one, is just flopping up and down, and nervously, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I said, John, if we just won the election, surely we can figure out how to do the transition. And so we went on about 2 to 3 minutes, and then Joe, in his way, had a briefcase. And after he let me and John fall all over ourselves for about 2 minutes, he opened up his briefcase and said, "If I may," and he pulled out the entire transition plan already done. Wow. Well, you could see John's heartbeat go down about 30 beats in about 1 second. And I can't remember if it was the first Saturday afterwards or the second Saturday, probably the second Saturday afterwards. We had about 200 people in the Barnes Thornburg conference room, former deputy mayors, CEOs, lawyers, former directors of departments in that office, in that conference room, about 200 people ready to help me during the transition. That was immensely important, and it's very humbling even to this day to talk about it. It told me that people are really engaged in Indianapolis. They really care, and no matter where they came from, they really care about the future of Indianapolis, and they were to help me and whoever my team turned out to be to get off on the right foot.
Greg, describe a little bit of the impetus for your mayoral candidacy. Were you pushing for it? Were you called to it, or were you pulled into it? Describe a little bit of that dynamic.
I had two gentlemen of that no one would probably know at this point in time. Tell me, one was tangentially related to the political world, saying nobody's running for mayor on the Republican side. You have the skill set to do it. You need to look into it. That was pretty much it. When I did look into it, I actually called the then county chair, Mike Murphy, and he got back to me a week later. I was at the golf show in the convention center. He called me back, and I said, "Listen, I'm being told I should run for mayor. What should I do?" He goes, "Well, slating convention, which they don't have anymore, where the party regulars, if you will, get this together and decide who they want to win the primary. That would be going on in about 3 more months." They did not slate the mayor at that time, but he said they slated all the councilors and a couple other offices. But he said, just bring a piece of paper, a 1-pager about yourself, so I made 700 pages the night before that slating convention, and that the next morning I went before anybody else got there and put those 1-pager on all of those seats at that slating convention. And that was my introduction to the party.
Mm.
Nobody knew me. I mean, I'm not sure that I knew one person there.
Because you had served overseas,
Right,
and had been away from the city for a while.
I had. I was in 23 years active duty in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
My last duty station was in Stuttgart, Germany. So I had just been back for a couple of years, had been working, a company on the west side for Bayer, not just a company, Bayer, the big Bayer out of Germany, for 3 or 4 years, and that was about it. So I didn't know the players. I didn't know. You'd be shocked. I didn't know who the law firms were. I didn't know who made the city go. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I just had 2 guys telling me I had the skill set to do this. That's all it was.
So, Joe, why did you say yes? And one of the things we talked about prior to getting on the air was your, I guess you call it, superpower of developing people. So maybe speak to both of those.
Well, I said yes because I knew that there were a lot of things that needed to be done in the city, and I also knew that there was a lot of pent-up demand from folks who would be willing to help. And so I guess my first call after Greg called me and said, "I want you to run the transition," was I called my good friend Bob Gran and told Bob that he was in this with me and that we were going to do this. And then we started reaching out to really started with a lot of the Goldsmith people that I had worked with in the past to see, okay, that we now had a Republican mayor again, and we needed to put together a team, and were they willing to help? And it was pretty amazing. Everybody wanted to help and was more than happy to do so. And my charge to them was, okay, call the 3 or 5 people that you can know that will want to help too, and let's get them in a room, introduce them to Greg, and then we'll begin to work on the campaign. And since Greg really didn't know a lot about the mayor's office at the time, we structured the transition team around both the education of Greg Ballard, but also to create a blueprint for when he brought his team into place of things that could be done. So literally, I mean, it's incredible. I still have in my office at Barnes Thornburg the binders. We had 70 different binders.
It was quite a bit.
3-ring binders. Michael Gargano and Ann Lathrop did tremendous work at Michael's consulting job at the time. They assembled the binder. We had computer disks for everybody. They went to their meetings. They would download stuff. We produced these documents that highlighted the problems to deal with and prioritized the problems. So everybody had a game plan, at least to start. They didn't have to follow it, but they at least had something to work with. Then the other part of that, in addition to just getting the nuts and bolts together for the campaign or for the running of the operations, was figuring out, okay, who's going to be on the team? And you don't find those people by just soliciting resumes. You have to know people and know people that could contribute. And so that was all done sort of hand-to-hand combat, if you will, where I'd make a telephone call, and my first reaction on, the person on the other end's first reaction was, "You're kidding me, right?" And I don't know Greg Ballard. He doesn't know me. But I had a cadre of people that I had gotten to know, younger people that I thought had the ability to step up and do this. Grand was incredibly helpful. I think, my calls went to a Paul Okeson, to a Michael Huber, to a David Reynolds, people I had worked with. Bob knew Robert Vane very well, reached out to Robert Vane. And so we began to build a list of folks, Chris Cotterill from the administration. And what we did with the team was we narrowed down the choices. We didn't have a lot of time. We narrowed down the choices, and for each position, we made a one-person recommendation. And we sent that person to meet with the mayor, and the mayor either gelled or it didn't. And I think with a couple of exceptions, all of those positions gelled. So we were able to put in place the folks that ultimately ran the city for the 8 years that Greg was there. And I think what's most satisfying to me about the people that we recruited, and I think Greg would agree, is that these are folks that in their individual careers, they have succeeded beyond government, and yet they continue to contribute and make recommendations and work for the quality of life of Indianapolis. And that was the best part of it.
Yeah, he listed a lot of all-stars and Robert Vane. And he
And Robert.
just kidding. One of my best friends, my mentor. Now you see the fruit of all that.
Right.
But at the time, how did you trust is the word that I keep coming back. When I hear that, I'm like, how did the mayor trust? What was it about Joe that you trusted him? And then how did you learn to trust perfect strangers in that intense situation?
That's a great question. But my time in the Marine Corps, you learn a lot in war and peace and how to read people well. And I had two people in front of me that helped me during the campaign when not a lot of people were.
Yeah.
And I could see they were doing it for the right reasons, because it looked like I was going to lose by 30 points. To say they weren't doing this for any other reason, but for the right reasons. And Joe's right. They gave me one candidate for each slot. And I had to trust what they did, because frankly, there was not time to interview 2-3 people for each slot. There just wasn't time at all. But I also knew that by that time, I knew that Joe and Bob were significant individuals within the city and within the state. And I knew they weren't going to put anybody in front of me that wasn't going to fit the bill. As it turned out, one I was uncomfortable with, and one declined the offer. So it was two people. And we filled them right up, and then we just moved smartly off, and it worked out really well. But I told every one of them the same thing. I said, if you're doing this for me or you're doing this for the party, we're not going to get along. If you're doing this for the long-term health of Indianapolis, we're going to get along just fine. And that seemed to really engage people who really wanted to make Indianapolis a better city.
What gives you the most hope about Indianapolis today?
People really care. It's not, you can go through some rough patches. I don't think there's any question about that. And Indianapolis has gone through some rough patches throughout the last 7-8 decades. But the fact that so many people care from both sides of the aisle, and they will come together at the right time to do what's right for the city long term, I think that's what's going to hold it in good stead for a long time. A lot of the times, when I was the mayor, the second term I had a Democratic council, and they would kind of fight me here and there and everything else. But I remember one counselor was Jackie Needus, who was a wonderful lady. And there was something up before the council that absolutely had to be done, and everybody knew it had to be done, but they were going to try to get their pound of flesh that they could out of me. But Jackie said in the council meeting, I see this afterwards because I didn't attend the council meetings, the budget meeting that I had to attend every year. But Jackie, I watched it on tape that she said, She said, "Now we all know this has to pass." So she's telling her fellow Democrats, "This all has to pass. So let's figure this thing out."
Yeah.
And that tells you everything you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
The city has to move in a certain direction, especially when it came to the sports strategy, which lifted up the city over the last 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
That was extremely important. And people came together back in the 60s and 70s to come together. Something called the city committee. There's just, I hate to use the word founding fathers because it wasn't all fathers.
Yeah.
It was Sandy Knapp and others, a lot of women involved in this too, that kind of put all of this together. While I was growing up, and a lot of time when I was in the Marine Corps, who put all this together, and it moved forward quite smartly. And it not just brought forth the sports strategy, it expanded the city out in so many other ways. I used to say a million times over, who is the main sponsor of the dance kaleidoscope? The Indianapolis Colts. I mean, there's that intersection is all throughout the city in so many different ways. And so sports strategy brought the city up in so many different ways that beyond the sports itself. And there are a lot of people involved with that at the city and the state level, both Democrats and Republicans, that made that happen.
I have a question about relationships in politics. I think if you come from a more populist background, relationships in politics are almost frowned upon. It's sort of one of the areas in society where it's like relationships, if you're on the outside just kind of watching on social media, you see, oh, you get elected and then you call the law firms and then they come in. But I think if you pay attention and you learn a little bit more, you see Indianapolis runs on relationships in a way that not a lot of other places do. Can you, A, give a defense of relationships in politics, and then B, from your frame of reference, being other places and other cities, what do you see about Indianapolis that's different?
I think it's related to what I just said, because I'll give you an example. I won't name names or name cities here, but after our Super Bowl, which was wildly successful by anybody's measures, we were now somebody to come talk to if another city wanted to host a Super Bowl. And one of the people that were involved in the Super Bowl committee went to another city and said, that city wanted advice, and that advice was given. And at the end of 2 hours, our committee member said, "You guys should not host a Super Bowl because the team is fighting with the city right in front in the meeting."
Yeah.
The team is fighting with the city. I'll do this, and the business sector is doing this, and the nonprofit sector is saying this, and they're just kind of arguing who would do what and who would do what. They were told, "Don't host the Super Bowl because you guys aren't together."
Yeah.
What I said previously about everybody kind of working together it sounds like cheerleading, but Indianapolis really is different. It really is, and it has been different over the last 60 years, and we should not forget that. There's a lot of people involved. A lot of people want to move it forward. Like I say, we go through some rough patches, and you might say we're going through one right now. Maybe not. But generally speaking, people do tend to come together when the important things come forward.
Joe and Greg, we're trying to develop authentic friendships and unleash those for the good of our city. Share an example or two of situations where your friendship may have been tested and where you had to get in each other's face or be candid. And how did you work through keeping your friendship intact, but then leveraging the energy of your friendship to do well with those particular situations?
No, you may. There's a couple actually. When you say that sort of friendship, I have to go to the other side of the aisle, right? So at that point in time, and I would suggest to you that it's getting a little crazy. Chris, you were talking early. Sometimes we're not talking to each other now. It's a little bit different, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, also with the Secretary of State's office. But back then, I'll give you two quick examples. When we put pre-K forward, I understand pre-K education is a state function, and the state was not moving forward on something that looked really obvious to almost every other state in the union, and they weren't going to move forward. So I moved forward with my team, and Ryan Bond in particular. A few others said we need to do this, and so I came out and said we're going to fund pre-K, which is a state function. I offered $2 million, and thankfully John Knuckleiter, a great man out, CEO of Lilly, said I'll get the other $8 million to start this thing to get to $10 million, and he did. He made those phone calls himself, and So lots of people don't know this, but I played golf with Monroe Gray almost every year I was the mayor one time.
Explain who Monroe is, please.
Monroe Gray at the time was the council president, and he was a notorious hardcore Democrat. Pretty good little golfer too. And we played, and we went out to, I think it was Noblesville. I can't remember the name of the course out there. Played one afternoon, and I pre-K's the topic because it looks like the council Democrats were going to vote this thing down, which is ironic because you can't find a Democrat in the entire United States that's against pre-K,
Right.
other than the ones on the Indianapolis City County Council. So I played. After the round, I'm there with Monroe and one of his friends, and I wouldn't let it go.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, "Oh, Greg, it's about this and about this," and I said, no, it's only about the kids. It's only about the kids. Oh, this isn't your area. All this. He went on and on and on, and I knew he was kind of trying to bluff me out of this thing, but I wouldn't let it go, and it was about an hour. It was about an hour of me going back and forth with him. Not loud, but I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And he finally said, "Okay, here's what I'll do. I won't vote for it, but I'll make sure it gets done."
Okay.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
I won't vote for it, but I'll make sure it gets done.
Yeah.
And that simply wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been playing golf with each other.
Probably. That's exactly true. Another quick example is there was another counselor, Democratic counselor, who knew that lots of those Saturdays they have vigils for murder victims in the city. Some people don't know that. I assume it's still going on. And I would attend some of those. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just attended them. And this counselor knew it. And he came up to me and says, "Mayor, I see you there. I know your heart's in the right place. Now, I can't vote with you a lot. But if you ever need one vote, you tell me what that is, and I'll deliver it for you." I asked for that vote on transferring the sewer, the water and the wastewater functions to Citizens Energy.
Gotcha.
And he came through, and we made it.
And that was all because you showed that solidarity.
I went to those events, and he knew what I was really about. And he said, "If you ever need that one vote, you just tell me what it is." And I said, "This is that vote." And he did it. And we got that done.
Joe, any thoughts on
you?
Well, I think your question was, did Greg and I ever have sort of an issue that sort of tested our friendship? And I honestly can't think of one. It just is. It was a relationship that, from my perspective, just fit together and worked really well. And so I can't think of a single time that you and I had a substantive disagreement. We might have a different path to get to some place. But that was really the responsibility, the way I looked at it, that was the responsibility of his team that worked for the city of Indianapolis and who were being paid by the city of Indianapolis to do that. And so, I might have done some behind the scenes lobbying of some of the chief staff people to get something to move in a certain direction, but we never had anything directly that sort of tested our friendship.
I don't think that he did multiples of. I'm not sure I would get his advice. Maybe I asked you to do something one time, but I don't really recall. Maybe I did, but he just knew what to do ahead of time anyway. And he did things at the State House that I never asked for, but he knew that the city needed. And I was not a micromanager. Everybody knew that. And I wanted people to do what they thought was best within their own purview. And Joe took that to extreme is not the word, but I mean, he took that to another level, if you will. So I knew he was doing much more for the city of Indianapolis than what he and I talked about. I'll put it that way.
So, Joe, I'm a person in their 30s and 40s. I'm married, a couple kids, working pretty hard in my career. We're in such a polarized kind of political situation now, maybe have a 50% participation rate just in voting. But I'm a person that wants to make a difference in the city, to help the city flourish. Well, what advice would you give someone like that? What questions would you ask them, or how do you think that they could engage with some system, some common good?
Well, I think the city's always looking for people who want to do that. And so if you actually get someone who reaches out and says, I'd like to do something, I mean, for me, it's what do you want to do? And if it's work in the sports space, or if it's work in the United Way space, or if it's work in an art or cultural space, it's easy enough to get that person directed to somebody in those other spaces who will talk to them and give them an opportunity. Because if somebody truly wants to volunteer their time and commit to do so, there's plenty of folks that are looking for people to do just that. The problem is that they're so caught up in their profession and trying to balance that with their personal life that it's really hard to find and cultivate that sort of volunteer. Really is hard. I know that we struggled with that at my law firm. We had 200 attorneys in the building on South Meridian Street, and yet maybe 20% of them actually did community-related things, and we incentivized people to do that. We wanted them to do that, but it was really, really hard because they were there. They'd bill their hours, and then they'd use their time how they wanted to do it, and not to continue to volunteer.
So let's say a person can't volunteer, but you said that a lot of the hires that you made were referability, right? That you knew certain folk. They said, hey, find 4 or 5 folk that you think care. How can I increase my referability quotient?
From a volunteer perspective?
No, I think just from hey, I they always say, you need to have relationships before you need them. Right. And so how could what advice would you give to just build relationships amongst you in your lobbying and all those kinds of things? You had obviously a lot in the emotional bank account vested in these relationships. Greg referred to a couple, situations where, hey, they wanted to do something for you. So I guess I'm just interested in, are there some things that you think, whether it's a young lawyer or whether it's a young business executive, to say, if you have limited time, at least, I can't tell you the number of people I say that, I really just don't have a network. I have a couple friends, but I don't have hardly any, of a larger friend. I guess I'm just interested because you're really kind of a relational guy in terms of all the people that you know and your assessment of talent.
Well, I think the time I spent as deputy mayor is what gave me access to get to know a lot of people. I didn't have that same depth of personal relationships when I worked at the state. I got those from the city. And I got those because I could see that my ability to do my job that I had for the city depended on me having those relationships and being able to work through issues with people. That's harder if you just came to me and said, how do I get to do that? And again, you have to start with what are you interested in doing, and then figure out how to connect that person to other persons that are in that space, because everybody's a little bit different. And to just say, there are many, many organizations that within the city that folks can participate in, and and probably they're not familiar with a lot of them if they were familiar with a lot of them. But again, I just find getting a lot of folks to volunteer is hard work.
Yeah.
People should work for the city wherever they are. That will give them not just that sort of experience, but they'll be part of the community forever at that point in time. There's lots of people who go work for the city at any level for 3 or 4 years. Then they go on to other jobs and they will benefit forever. Yeah. Not just in their relationships, but they will benefit the community. But there are 2 examples come to mind right now. Paul Okeson had just started a company with Lockmuller. He had been there less than 6 months, I believe. And he's really talented, very smart guy. And he asked the CEO there, I want to go help the new mayor. And he did. Robert Vane had been working with Sheila Sexton for like a month.
It was literally like 6 weeks.
And
finally making money. Yeah. You'd been in the public sector for a while.
And then he helped in the transition. Yeah. And then he went back to Sheila Sexton, but in less than a year, he came back on full time with us. And people gave up some time. What looks like they gave up their career path, but I think in the end, it paid off quite nicely for almost everyone.
In answer to Don's question, it really sounds like politics is a great way to build a network of people, meet a lot of people, build relationships.
There are, because there's so many people in there that are trying to do the right thing for the city, the state, whatever that level is. And there's so many people involved with that, both not just people working it, but the people on the outside who are trying to advocate for the government or trying to lobby to the government or whatever it might be. Your relationship status will just grow throughout the people that you know and associate with will just grow exponentially.
What Indianapolis neighborhood taught you the most?
Say again?
What Indianapolis neighborhood are you look at kind of someplace that's vibrant that said, wow, that's really, that embodies what you are about?
That's a neighborhoods have affected me, but not in the way you're thinking.
Take it wherever you want it.
Well, I just had certain instances where you get, it's difficult to say. I'll just give you one example. All right. So I grew up in the Devington area when I was 12 years old. I moved to Arlington High School. Yeah. I went to Cathedral downtown, but I'm a block and a half from Arlington High School. So on the other side of Arlington, there were some apartments over there. And now I'm the mayor. All right. And there's a lady in there. And I mean, I know this to be true, but she's put it in a way that I used well over a dozen times. And it's in the book too. She's on hourly salary. And she has to go to the doctor over by 56 in Georgetown, where I'm actually living as the mayor. I'm in that area as the mayor at the time. And she has to get on 3 buses to go to her doctor. And she loses all of her day's pay to go on those 3 buses for that 20 to 30 minute doctor's appointment, going back and forth. And I said repeatedly, if you or I went to that doctor's appointment, we'd take a couple hours off of work, go to the doctor's appointment, and come back, and we wouldn't lose a penny of our salary. That's why we need transit in the city. Yeah. And for some reason, people can't see that economic mobility for lots of folks are tied to actual mobility. If you want economic mobility, actual mobility matters quite a bit. For people being able to get around on a better basis than they have to go three buses just to go to a half-hour doctor's appointment. There are stories about that all over the city. Yeah. And so those things affect you. And you kind of, if you hear it enough and you look at the numbers and the data, then you take action.
Joe and Greg, with the upcoming mayor's election, 2028, what strong advice would you give to the mayor that may not be given by others based on your experience as folks who've led our city, Greg, you grew up in our city. What's on your heart and mind that by which you would issue a strong mandate to our next mayor to take our city to the next level, whether it be correcting the bad and the ugly and amplifying the good, or however you want to state that. But what's on your mind there?
I would recommend always doing what I did when I ran for mayor, which is all I could do, frankly, was listen to the people. Frequently, I see so many things. I certainly see it in other cities all the time. When I hear I hate to say ideology of the mayor, because mayors, once in office, should have no ideology at all. You have to do what's right for the city. I've said repeatedly, it's the highest level official that's actually can make a difference in people's lives on a daily basis. And speaking ideology is useless. You should serve the people and understand what that means. And a lot of that is very nuts and bolts stuff, very much nuts and bolts stuff. And making sure the roads are good, making sure that you have relative public safety. And even though mayors traditionally don't have education, the mayor of Indianapolis actually has a lot of influence on education. And so drive education in the correct way. Just basic stuff like that will take you a long, long way. And that's a quality of life issue. People want to live their life in the city, and they don't want to hear what your ideology is when you're trying to be the governor or the senator. No one cares. Do the right thing. Let the rest of it take care of itself.
That's good. Joe, how about you?
I think from my perspective, it's the most important thing is who you choose to surround yourself with. Government has, in the time I've been working in this space, has become so much more complex, and it really takes smart people to be engaged to get things right, and those people have to be empowered to essentially go off and do good and operate as Greg always had. You had to be doing the right thing for the right reason. And you have to have the mayor or the governor sets that as the standard, but then you've got to attract really talented people and empower them to go do things. And because again, if it's bottled up or micromanaged, the mayor said he was not a micromanager, but it's hard sometimes for leaders not to be more micromanaging in their approach to doing business. When that happens, everything slows down, and it slows down to the point that government doesn't really work for the community any longer, or work for the state any longer. And so I'm a big fan on who you attract and how you find talent and bring people. And I'll just add the issue with Paul Okeson coming. Not only did he have to leave his company, he had to move across the street because he lived in Hamilton County on the wrong side of 96th Street. And I had to tell him, you've got to move into Marion County. But, again, as the mayor said, all of their opportunity with the city has all led to greater success for all of them in their professional careers.
That's beautiful. Well, Greg, as you have announced your candidacy for Secretary of State, what principles that you and Joe have forged in the past are you taking forward? And what's your clarion call? Why Secretary of State? What's the need? And how do you plan to help take our state to the next level that it needs to be?
Great question. I was talking to college students quite a bit, a lot on my book, obviously, and that if you want things to change, you have to get involved. You have to get in there. And somewhere along that time frame of talking to college students, I think it really hit me at the last time I was down at IU. I kind of said, I'm still in good shape here. I can maybe I can make a difference still myself. And then the numbers that you always want some data behind this, even though when the mayor was kind of fly by night at that point in time. But this one is not. 41% of Hoosiers see themselves as independents. Less than 30% see themselves as Democrats or Republicans. It's kind of a closed system. Less than 20% of the people in the state of Indiana can actually run for office. It's just, and then we have right now a system where the parties can't talk to each other publicly. And they can't even say hi to each other because if there's a picture taken, they will be primaried in the next election. Mm-hmm. And the primary has become the main election. And I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to say that 2 weeks ago in the primaries, that 10 to 12% of the population just elected 95% of the state house. That's a real problem. That's a real problem. And the only way I see out of this is to create somebody or a group of people who are more centrist in their approach, more moderate, who are more focused on what the people need and not what the parties need. And that's what this is really about. And if we do this correctly, according to the Indiana law, then we'll be able to do this for years to come, as long as we get on the ballot. And when we get on the ballot, we'll accomplish half of what we want to do, because we will be able to do this into the future and have effects on races. We're not going to enter every race. That's not the intent. But the intent is to affect the far right and the far left and kind of bring them toward the middle. And then we want to put our own candidate in there also. And I'm the first one, obviously, but it's having an impact, because it's not an exaggeration to say that we're having problems in the Secretary of State's office right now. I think that's really well known. And I want to go in and change that. And there's lots of things in the near future. We're going to come out with something called a Voters' Bill of Rights, which is essentially about voter access, ballot access, those sorts of things, so that it's easier for people to vote in Indiana, but also it's easier for people to run in the state of Indiana. There's other things in there, like we should be a referendum state. We need to get rid of straight ticket voting. Only 6 states that do straight ticket voting. I mean, it's just so much is in there in the Indiana law that prevents everybody from participating. And that's one thing we really need to change, and that's why I'm doing this.
I don't know if people have kind of the perspective how big it would be to get on the ballot and to get 2%, 10%. I'm the last paid employee of a third party in Indiana, the executive director of the Libertarian Party. And if he gets 2% in the Secretary of State's race, that opens up the Lincoln Party to be on every ballot in every race across the state for 4 years. 10%, you are in a primary and you get all the data of the people who are in your party. So it has, and you can be appointed to boards and commissions up and down the state and counties statewide. It has the potential to really reshape politics. So you're thinking not just about this race, but beyond.
And when you say the 2% and 10% all being true, obviously, who's on the election commission? Big deal. And
I was on the HAVA commission, and I was the swing vote because I was the only non-Republican, non-Democrat.
Right.
It makes a huge difference. It totally changes things.
And before I even was asked to do this, I was polling at 24% in this race. So this is in a 3-way race.
4-way.
A 4-way, I should say. That's right, a 4-way race. That's right. And so that's significant. Mm-hmm. And if you do this thing correctly, we are going to make a huge impact. And this is bigger than people know. Mm-hmm. It is about me becoming Secretary of State, and I'm going to give it everything I got. I'm in this thing to win it. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it's going to have tremendous impact throughout the state.
Mm-hmm. I'll jump in here for a second. So there, as we've talked a little bit about the team that Greg put together to run the administration, well, that core group of the team is still incredibly loyal to Greg. And so we got together with him before the first of the year, and I was on the side of I was a bit of a cynic, because I was like, why do you want to do this? When you ran for mayor, it was in your heart to run for mayor, and you could put 100% of your energy into getting this done. So we had dinner with him, and it's the cast of characters that we've talked about here today that got together with him, and we pushed him and said, "Is this something you really want to do? And do you have the same energy?" And actually, at that first meeting, he said, I'm still thinking about it. I'm not there yet. I'm going to work through this in my own mind. And we got back together a few weeks later, and he had moved a little more stronger into wanting to do this. I think from his comments here, you'll see that this clearly has re-energized him to want to do this, and to, as he said, to do it for the right reasons. And so all of us have stayed incredibly loyal, and we're all in on the Greg Ballard effort.
Greg, can you talk about the petitioning that you're going through now to get on the ballot? Where are you at with that? What do you need?
And that's a great question. But one other thing I should say about the effect of this is nobody has to go through this anymore if we get these signatures and get on the ballot. Big deal. Big deal again. We need 37,000 signatures verified by the county clerks. As you can imagine, a lot of those are going to come through central Indiana. So we were thinking we need 50,000 signatures to make sure that 37,000 are actually verified by the county clerks. We're probably, if we're not over 30, we're knocking on the door 30 right now of signatures ready to go on in and to get verified. We have to do it by the end of June. We're thinking that it's going to be closer to the end of May that we're going to put in all of those numbers, and then we'll have the county clerks count them. Traditionally, it's 75 to 80% somewhere in there that the county clerks verify because they can't read something, or somebody lives in Hamilton County but they vote in Shelby County or something, and so they're thrown out. Some of those things happen too, and they just forgot where they are. So the county clerks will verify all of these signatures, and hopefully by the end of May or the first week of June, that we'll have all these into the county clerk's hands.
There's a real loyalty, Joe, to Greg, and sounds like to the team. What is it? Not everybody has that loyalty. What is it in Greg that Mayor Ballard that character-wise, or I'm mystified a little by that. It's not the highest paying jobs. It's not, some of them are totally volunteer, right? The people that you're talking about coming alongside him.
I think that first, everybody genuinely likes the mayor. He is an anomaly, I've said, in politics. He is a tremendous champion for Indianapolis. He is very thoughtful in the way he approaches doing business. But he challenges people to do, as he says over and over in his book, the right thing. And I think people just sort of gravitate to that and enjoy working with a leader like that, who wakes up every day. It's not about how is this going to play politically for me, or how is this going to position me for the next thing I want to do politically. It's basically, is this the right thing? In the case of the mayor's office, is this the right thing for the city of Indianapolis? And reasonable people could disagree on some of those issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that disagreement occurred, and that's why you have votes on the council and move forward. But it's just easy to like to work with somebody like that. It's a change of pace. It's much more like when I started working in politics back in when I was at Legislative Services and then moved to the House Republican Caucus in the mid '80s. It was a very different environment, and people, both sides of the aisle, actually liked one another and got along with one another, mm-hmm. and could leave the State House at the end of the day, go across the street to the press club, and sit around this big round table that was there and solve problems. Yeah. And we've lost so much of that. And so when somebody like Greg comes along, it's just easy to attract, and people want to work for that and want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. It's really about doing the right thing versus such a hard political message.
I think so.
Chris and Greg?
Yeah, I would just say I've heard the press club a few times, and the loss of the press club a dozen times over the course of the podcast that I've edited. What was it, the press club, and why was it special, and in terms of relationships and how that helped the state?
Well, because people could. So the press club was across the street from the State House. It's in what is now referred to as the ISTA building, and there was, it was an environment. There was a bar there, and you could get some food, but it wasn't what you really wanted. but
chicken tenders, okay.
But it was a. And at that time, there wasn't a lot downtown Indianapolis. So most of the legislators either lived at the Columbia Club, or they lived at the Athletic Club, or they lived in the Omni, which was the old Atkinson Hotel. And there really wasn't a lot of places for folks to gather. And so they gathered at the press club. And so once they were there, and they were outside of the political, floor stuff that goes on, which is sometimes theater, and they could actually sit there and they got to know one another, and they found that they liked each other, and they were able to engage and discuss political issues around a large table, and oftentimes, and then they'd go back in and do what they did on the floor, but they knew where they were going to end up. And so it was an opportunity for people to get together. And that doesn't exist anymore, because now a lot of people, there's far more hotels that they stay in. Some have condominiums. They break up in the evening, and they'll go off in all sorts of different directions, and they're really not together engaging and working and trying to solve problems.
Thank you for that. Mayor, John asks a question that thankfully he asked the question because Joe Garrison and Robert Vane, they were going to follow up with you after this interview. How do you get your signature on the list?
2 ways. You can go to the gregballard.com, which is now the campaign website. So I've had my domain name for years now. There's a whole story there. It's kind of funny, but I have it. And so the campaign has taken over my domain name, gregballard.com. And there's also something called Ballard on the Ballot that's out there right now, because we're trying to get 100 people to do 100 signatures, which is 10,000 signatures. So either one of those, you can actually push a button and download the signature form and the petition and sign it and then send it in. There's an address there. You can do that. Or before you do that, if you want to go out and get a few more signatures to help out the cause, you can do that too. But it's you can push a button on either one of those, gregballard.com or ballardontheballot.com.
Excellent. Greg, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to thank you both for what you've done to make this adopted city of mine a city to which I want to stay in. And here I'm in California. My family's trying to recruit me back here, even yesterday. And I said, no way. I'm planting my flag still in Indianapolis. And I want to thank you both for spending time with us, for encouraging us, for showing us a way forward, how we can develop friendships, how we can, through our faith, believe that something better is realizable and achievable for our city, and to together lock arms and pursue that. So thank you both, and wish you all the best, Mayor Ballard, and thank you for that domain site, because I'm going to be going on that as soon as possible.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
And Joe, thank you. Bob Grant's a great friend and part of the Citizen 7 movement, helping us go forward, and for all you've done through your work there, but then showing us how we can get engaged in the city beyond our professional careers is really encouraging.
Joe, Greg, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having us, Chris.
Don, Greg,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
for being here. And thank you to everyone who has watched and listened. And if you're inspired to get involved with other guys who are trying to do better for the common good and make this city a great place to live, go to citizen7indy.com and you can sign up for the emails there. Come to an event, meet other guys. And the more events you come to, the more guys you meet, and it's just a lot of fun. And we appreciate you listening, and share this like this and spread the word on the podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next month.